It's those odd butterfly sensations every time I think about my evolving gift. My mother kept referring to it as the family curse, but my grandmother managed to lure me here to Paramour Bay for a reason, to discover my true calling. You see, I was your average, everyday woman living in New York City, just trying to get by when I received a phone call that my Nan had passed away. We'd been estranged for years due to my mother, so don't get too choked up. I didn't realize it at the time, but my mother wanted no part of our family legacy and had endeavored to keep me in the dark about all of it. Had I known, it would have made this transition a lot easier for all of us. You can imagine the shock I went through in discovering the dark family secret. The Marigolds were honest-to-goodness, dyed-in-the-wool, real witches. Anyway, a long story short, Nan ended up leaving me her quaint little tea shop called Tea, Leaves, and Eves in the very small town of Paramour Bay, Connecticut. There were some stipulations contained in her last wishes, of course, but we'll get into those provisions later. Right now, the most important thing you should know is that Nan used a bit of not-so-white magic, for good reason, I might add, to keep her familiar alive so that I had someone to clue me in on the rites and practices of my birthright. It probably wasn't one of her best incantations in hindsight, but that's where Leo enters the picture. Mr. Leo to you. I continued to ignore him as usual. Elsie and Wilma couldn't hear Leo, though they could see the ruffian as he lounged in the warm rays of the morning sun shining through the large display window at the front of the shop. What little heat the sunshine provided was rather deceiving, seeing as it was the first week of December in Connecticut. Flurries were expected in the forecast later today, which meant Leo would probably remain in that exact same spot until the clouds moved in and took away his heat source. Unfortunately, there was a slight problem with Leo's rather tragic appearance. My explanation that he was a rescue cat who'd been in a dreadful accident seemed to hold with the townsfolk, though. Just say it. I resemble Frankenstein's pet cat. It was true, but I usually tried to keep my opinions to myself. It wasn't easy, because he could read all of my thoughts. Nevertheless, Leo tended to be overly sarcastic. It was easy to forget he had feelings, but he certainly was not a powerful witch's familiar that I wanted on my bad side. I shuddered to think of the level to which he'd stoop in order to get his point across. Nevertheless, I can sum up Leo's appearance in one word. Horrific. I'm being serious. His whiskers were bent at every odd angle imaginable, his orange and black fur had tufts sticking out everywhere, his tail resembled a wire hanger bent at random 90-degree angles, and his left eye was noticeably larger than his right. Truthfully, it was a bit disconcerting to look directly at him. It also didn't help that he was overweight and his legs were rather short, similar to an Oompa Loompa household cat. You should have seen me in my glory days. Did Mindy say yes to Larry's dinner proposal? I asked, giving the two women my attention as I rung up Wilma's sale on my new cash register. I'd even gotten one of those credit card machines to make purchases easier for my customers, though it hadn't been used in the few days the small device had been sitting on the counter since all of my customers paid in cash. They'd done so for years with my Nan. I think it's good for Larry to move on after his divorce, and Mindy is an absolute sweetheart. Still on the subject of my looks. Have you seen the latest style? I'll have you know that long hair and scruffy beards are back in. I'm no different than those GQ models with a 5 o'clock shadow. We'd heard from a friend that you and Mindy had lunch together the other day, Elsie said with a sparkle in her eyes before sidling up to the counter. She didn't seem to care that Wilma was digging in her sleeve for the hanky she'd stored up there just 10 seconds ago. It's good to see you making friends, my dear. I could just imagine what the residents of Paramour Bay thought of me after my initial arrival. It had been like falling through a trap door. Did I mention that I found a dead body in the back of my shop? I did, and it had come right on the heels of my arrival. Of course, it had caused all kinds of excitement, seeing as the last murder to have taken place in this tiny town was over 53 years ago. Let's just hope I hadn't started a trend, because I'm relatively sure the townsfolk would run me out of town on a rail. I shuddered to think what these good citizens would do if they discovered I was actually a witch. I would go into more detail about the murder investigation, but Wilma was staring out the display window while repeatedly shoving her elbow into Elsie's side. I didn't even have to follow their stares to know that Sheriff Liam Drake was leaving the station to walk.